Hello, in this audio note we are going to learn how to build a value map, and to do so we will first present a relationship that exists between consumer surplus and competition. Consumer surplus, which is represented in our rectangle in this green area here, the difference between perceived benefit and the price paid by the product for the product by consumers, needs to be positive for the purchase to occur. This will be the first main assumption of our consumer behavior model. The second one will be that if there is a choice between two or more products, consumers will choose the one with the largest consumer surplus. Therefore, to compete successfully, firms need to deliver consumer surplus. And a firm can increase consumer surplus either increasing the perceived benefit, including some quality attributes within the product so that the consumer is able to pay more for that product, or by decreasing the price that the producer is asking for the product. So these are the two ways that any firm in this market may increase consumer surplus. When products differ in quality, competing firms can be viewed as submitting consumer surplus bids with their quality price combinations. When a firm fails to offer as much consumer surplus as its rivals, its sales will decline. Okay, then a value map illustrates the competitive implications of consumer surplus. The vertical axis in a value map shows the monetary price of the products, and the horizontal axis depicts the quality offered Q. Okay. Each point in the value map corresponds to a particular price quality combination. So here in this value map, it's represented the position of two firms, firm E and firm F. Firm E is offering a product whose quality level is QE and is asking a price PE for it, and firm F is offering a product of quality QF and asks a price PF for it. This solid upward sloping line is called indifference curve. So, what's an indifference curve? For consumers whose preferences are represented by an indifference curve, any price quality combination along the indifference curve yields to the same consumer surplus. So this is the definition of indifferent curves. Indifferent curves represent consumer preferences, not position of products. Given any indifference curve of a market, firms can make different offers, different combinations, price quality combinations. Okay, but if products align along an indifferent curve, that means that they exhibit consumer surplus parity. That is exactly, they are offering the same consumer surplus to consumers in the market. For competition among firms, we have already said it, in a market can be thought of as a process whereby firms, through their prices and product qualities attributes, submit consumer surplus bids to consumer. So consumers then choose the firm that offers the greatest amount of consumer surplus. A consumer choosing among products located along the indifference curve, which it would be the case here for F and E, would be indifferent among these two offerings. If this was the case in a real market, both firms E and F would split the market equally, each firm enjoying half of the market share, since products E and F exhibit consumer surplus parity. They align along the same indifference curve. Okay, this is clear, I think. But in this case, it's clear that F and E don't align along the same indifference curve. So they are not offering the same consumer surplus. Who is offering the most consumer surplus to consumers? Firm E or firm E? Firm F, sorry. Well, given the quality level of product F, in order for consumers to be indifferent between product E and product F, they would be able to pay for that product F with quality QF a price of PF prime. Since the firm is asking, F is asking a larger price for this quality level, PF, we will say that F is offering less consumer surplus to consumers than product E. Okay. In this case, again, these two firms are not offering the same consumer surplus. Who is offering a larger consumer surplus, F or E? Well, given the quality level offered by product E, in order for the consumers to be indifferent with product F, they would be able to pay for this quality level QE, they would be able to pay PE prime. And E is asking just PE for that product, so it's offering a larger consumer surplus than F in this case. So if this was the case, firm E would gain the whole market since it's offering larger consumer surplus to consumers. So if F doesn't react to this movement made by E, it will gain the whole market E, but F may react, which is the price that F should fix in order to restore this surplus consumer parity with E. The answer is not PE. To answer, we have to keep in mind consumer preferences represented by the slope of the indifference curve. Therefore, what we do is we draw a new indifference curve, the dotted line here in the figure, which would be parallel to the previous one, meaning that represents the preferences of the same consumers. It has the same slope, but below the previous one, representing in this way, being below that, it's representing a larger consumer surplus than the previous one. When doing so, it's easy to see that the price that makes F restore surplus consumer parity with E is PF prime. Okay, we have already said that the slope of the indifference curve represents the trade-off between price and quality that consumers are willing to make. The steeper the slope of the indifference curve, the greater the willingness to pay more to obtain additional quality. So in order to acquire it in this figure, where there are two indifference curves that would represent the preferences of two different segments of consumers within the same market, in order to acquire the extra quality represented at level Q2 in comparison with level Q1, consumers whose preferences are represented by the green indifference curve are willing to pay more for this increasing quality than those represented by the orange indifference curve, who only would pay this amount to obtain that increase in quality, delta Q. So the slope of the indifference curve represents the trade-off between price and quality that consumers are willing to make. The steeper the slope, the greater the willingness to pay more to obtain additional quality. This simple value map here draws the situation. If it draws the situation of a real market, it would mean that the preferences of all consumers in this market can be represented by the same indifference curve. All the consumers have identical preferences for quality, but this is not the most frequent situation. This other value map represents a market with two segments of consumers, which is a more realistic situation. Those consumers whose preferences are represented by this orange curve, difference curve, the lower slope that we call the standard segment here, are willing to pay less for any given increase in quality than those whose preferences are represented by the green one. Higher slope, well, we may call them the elite segment. Imagine now within the same value map that there are two firms within this market offering products whose price quality combinations are represented by points E and F. Which firm will sell to which segment? Well, firm F will not sell to segment 1 because it's above that indifference curve. That means that it offers less surplus to these consumers than firm E, which aligns within this indifference curve of the standard segment. But both firms, E and F, that align within the indifference curve that represent preferences of the elite segment, both firms will sell to segment 2. They offer consumer surplus parity to these consumers since they align along the different curve that represents their preferences. Well, and to finish with these notes, just a caption that you will need to use in future notes, that the price increase along an indifference curve, this price increase, PF minus PE, corresponds exactly to the incremental perceived benefit caused by the increase in quality offered by product F with regard to product E. And this is the demonstration. Since by definition of indifference curve, consumer surplus at E is the same as consumer surplus at F, consumer surplus at E is perceived benefit by E minus price E, which equals to perceived benefit in F with F minus price F. And well, if we move from one side to another, we see how the increase in prices equals the increase in perceived benefit when both products align along the same indifference curve. Thank you very much for your attention.